So imagine for a second that you take a strange, just totally unmarked USB drive and you just plug it straight into your laptop.
Right, which, is basically the first rule of what not to do with computers.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a terrible idea
Yeah.
because the second you plug it in, the screen just goes completely black.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the cooling fans instantly spin up to maximum. The hard drive is aggressively whirring. And suddenly your computer is running this completely alien operating system, something you never installed.
Right.
Now, I want you to imagine doing that exact same thing, but to your own brain.
That is a deeply, deeply unsettling image.
It really is. But today, we're going to dive into a truly provocative piece of writing that argues exactly that. It argues that the mushroom you see, just quietly growing on a forest floor, it isn't just a plant or a fungus.
Right. It's essentially a biological USB drive.
Exactly. And it is actively trying to hack you.
It's just such an incredibly disruptive premise. What we're looking at today is a piece from April 2026.
Yep.
It was published on Substack by an author who goes by the name SpiralSeekr. And the title of the piece is Fungal Cybernetics, Psilocybin as Exogenous Code.
It was a heavy title.
It is, yeah. And the essay itself attempts this massive, just entirely cross-disciplinary thought experiment.
Yeah, it really pulls from everywhere, doesn't it?
It does. It takes concepts from clinical pharmacology, information theory, computer science, and, macroecology. And it just violently smashes them all together.
Right.
And the goal is to completely erase the boundary between biological organisms on one side and computer networks on the other.
Because we usually think of those as two completely separate, non-overlapping domains, right? I mean, biology is dirt, it's leaves, blood, organic growth.
Right, it's squishy.
Yeah, exactly, it's squishy. And technology is, well, it's silicon, right? It's fiber optics and rigid lines of code.
Totally separate worlds in our minds.
Right. So our mission for you today in this deep dive is to completely unpack SpiralSeekr's argument that this boundary, this line between nature and tech is a total illusion.
And to do that, we are going to entirely reframe human consciousness.
Yeah.
We're going to reframe the ecology of the planet and really examine what it actually means when a biological system, quote unquote, computes something.
Because by the time we finish this deep dive, the way you look at a forest, and honestly, the way you look at your own mind, is going to be radically altered.
I completely agree.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really grasp the mechanics of what this author is proposing, I think we have to start by establishing the baseline, right? Like, what does traditional science say is actually happening here?
Yeah, that's a good place to start. So in classical clinical psychiatry, the model for understanding a psychedelic like psilocybin is strictly localized. It's entirely biochemical.
Right, it's just chemistry.
Exactly. It's categorized as a classical psychedelic. And the standard, medical textbook narrative states that when you ingest it, your body just metabolizes the psilocybin into psilocin.
Okay, so it changes form slightly.
Right. And then that new molecule crosses the blood-brain barrier and finds its way to very specific serotonin receptors, primarily the 5-HT2A receptors, which are located in the neocortex.
Which is basically the classic lock and key metaphor we all learned in high school biology.
Precisely.
The molecule is just a physical shape, and it happens to perfectly fit into this specific receptor.
Yeah, it binds, and then it causes a chemical cascade. Your neurons start firing sort of erratically, and you experience altered perception for, a few hours.
Until the chemical just metabolizes and gets flushed out of the system.
Right. It's treated essentially as just a chemical intoxicant, something that is temporarily disrupting the normal healthy baseline of the brain.
That is the established, comfortable view.
It is. But SpiralSeekr argues that this pharmacological explanation, while mechanically true on a microchemical level, is functionally blind.
Functionally blind. I love that phrasing.
Yeah, because it completely misses the actual architecture of the event.
Yeah.
The author explicitly states we need to abandon that whole chemical lens. And instead, we need to view this process through the, and this is a direct quote, the topological lens of information theory.
Okay, I want to stop right there.
Yeah.
Because topological information theory sounds like something you'd hear in like a graduate level applied mathematics seminar.
It really does.
It doesn't sound like it belongs in a discussion about, fungi and mushrooms.
Yeah.
How are we applying advanced data theory to a physical, squishy molecule crossing a blood-brain barrier?
Well, topology in mathematics is the study of properties of a space that are preserved under continuous deformations.
Wait, you lost me. Deformations.
Right. So topology doesn't care about rigid geometry. It doesn't care about exact distances.
Okay.
It cares about how things are connected, how they relate to each other, and the overall shape of the network.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about the connections, not the physical shape.
Exactly. And then you have information theory, which was pioneered by Claude Shannon, and that studies the quantification, storage, and communication of digital information.
Right, so we're talking about data transfer.
Yeah. So SpiralSeekr merges these two concepts. The author argues that a psilocybin molecule shouldn't be viewed merely as a physical structure made of carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen.
Which is how a chemist would see it.
Right. Instead, we need to view the molecule as a highly compressed packet of data.
Oh, wow. So the physical molecule itself is just a zip file.
Basically, yeah. The physical shape of the molecule is just the casing. The topology, so the specific configuration of its electron clouds, its vibrational frequencies, its electromagnetic resonance, that is actually a mathematically structured language.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we shouldn't look at the molecule as a physical key that bumps into a receptor and causes like a random chemical reaction.
Oh, not at all.
We should look at it as a string of data entering a port.
Exactly.
And the author actually uses a highly specific term for the brain in this context. They call it hominid wetware.
Hominid wetware. It really strips the romance out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah. It really does. And I want you, listening right now, to try to adopt this perspective for a moment. Try to strip away all the mystical, ineffable concepts of the soul or the mind.
Just put those aside for the duration of this deep dive.
Right. Treat your brain strictly as a piece of biological hardware.
Yeah.
It's carbon-based. It runs on, a few dozen watts of electricity?
About 20 watts, yeah.
20 watts of electricity, and it's just suspended in cerebrospinal fluid. It is fundamentally an information processing engine.
And that specific framing sets up the first major conceptual leap in the text, moving away from chemistry and moving into code.
Right.
SpiralSeekr posits that tryptamines, which is the entire class of compounds that include psilocybin, they are not intoxicants.
Which is how the law and medicine treat them.
Right. But the text defines them instead as executable exogenous code.
Executable exogenous code. Let's break that down.
Let's do it.
So exogenous meaning it originates entirely outside the host organism. It's foreign. And executable, meaning it is a set of specific instructions designed to be run by a processor.
Yes.
Which brings us right back to that USB drive analogy from the intro. When I plug a flash drive into a computer, the physical plastic and the metal connectors, they aren't doing anything to the computer's motherboard, right?
No, they're completely inert. They just facilitate the physical connection.
Right. What actually alters the computer's behavior is the decompressed data flowing through the port once that connection is made.
Exactly. And SpiralSeekr is arguing that ingesting a psilocybin spore is fundamentally an act of data transmission. Wow. What's fascinating here is how it forces us to entirely reevaluate what a receptor site actually is.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, in the traditional model, the 5-HT2A receptor is just passively sitting there, right? It's doing its normal job for the human serotonin system.
Just managing mood and cognition and whatever else.
Yeah. And the traditional view is that it accidentally gets hijacked by a foreign molecule that just happens to fit the lock.
Right. It's viewed as a biological coincidence, like a freak accident of chemistry.
Exactly. But SpiralSeekr argues there is no coincidence.
None at all.
None. The receptor site isn't being randomly triggered. It is actively functioning as a data port receiving a, and this is another quote, trans-species information packet.
Trans-species information packet.
Yes. When the molecule binds, the receptor is essentially executing a command to download a temporary operating system.
Okay, I have a hard time wrapping my head around the biomechanics of that. I mean, how does a chemical bond translate into a software download?
It's a massive shift in perspective for sure.
Because a computer downloads an OS using binary, right? Ones and zeros flowing over a Wi-Fi card or through a copper wire. What is the actual biological equivalent of transferring that kind of data?
Well, we have to look at the cascade effect differently. When a receptor like 5-HT2A is activated, it doesn't just, twitch. It initiates a massive cascading series of intracellular events. It alters the expression of certain genes. It changes the electrical gradient of the neuron. It opens and closes specific ion channels.
And traditionally, we just view this as a messy chemical soup reacting to a foreign substance.
Exactly. But from a cybernetic perspective, that cascade is a highly orchestrated boot sequence.
A boot sequence, like turning on a PC.
Yes. The molecule provides the initial topological signal. It's
Mm.
the password, essentially.
Oh, wow.
And then the neuron responds to that password by unpacking a complex series of instructions that physically reorganizes how the brain's internal network routes information.
Which raises a massive, just a glaring question about evolutionary biology.
I think I know where you're going with this.
I mean, if a fungus is handing us a biological USB drive containing an incredibly complex operating system,
Right.
and our brains are equipped with the exact specific ports required to unpack and run that code,
Why? The why is the biggest question of all.
because developing a highly complex executable software patch that is perfectly calibrated to interface with the neural architecture of a primate, that requires an immense amount of evolutionary energy.
It really does.
And nature doesn't just expend energy on that scale by accident, right? It doesn't do things for fun.
No, nature is ruthlessly efficient. You're touching on the concept of evolutionary utility.
Right.
And the text points out that this downloading process bridges a communication gap between two completely disparate systems.
Okay, what are the two systems?
Well, on one side, you have subterranean fungal networks. These operate on chemical signaling and slow-wave electrical impulses across vast physical distances underground.
They're like miles of forest floor.
Exactly. And on the other side, you have carbon-based hominid wetware, human brains,
Right.
which operate on high-speed neural firing, but it's entirely localized within a tiny enclosed skull.
So they're completely incompatible networks.
By default, yes. But by engineering a molecule that perfectly fits the primate receptor, the fungus is actively bridging that gap. It is forcing a handshake protocol between two completely separate networks.
I want the listener to think about what it takes to update a smartphone.
It's a massive undertaking.
Right. It takes thousands of engineers at Apple or Google writing millions of lines of code just to create an OS that slightly changes how your phone processes data.
Yeah.
Now imagine that the sprawling ancient networks of mycelium beneath the forest floor have been blindly, iteratively writing and refining code for millions of years.
Millions of years of trial and error.
And that code isn't designed to make a plant grow faster. It isn't designed to deter a predator from eating it.
No.
It's designed to fundamentally alter the perception and data processing capabilities of a primate.
It's incredible. And it really strips humanity of its engineered supremacy,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We like to think we invented coding.
Right. We think we invented networks and software and the internet.
But SpiralSeekr is suggesting that the Earth has been writing executable code since long before primates even existed.
Yeah. And we are simply one of the available biological devices capable of running their software.
So if we accept this premise, and for the sake of this deep dive, we're fully stepping into this framework, that psilocybin is an external operating system.
An alien software patch.
Right. The immediate question is, what actually happens when you hit run?
What happens when the code executes?
Exactly. What happens inside the hominid wetware when the execution command is successfully given?
Well, to understand the software, we really have to look at the hardware it's overriding.
Okay.
Specifically, there is a deeply ingrained piece of human architecture called the default mode network.
The DMN. You hear about this a lot in modern neuroscience.
You do. The DMN is essentially the brain's baseline routing system.
Right. So what does it actually do?
Well, think about when you are not actively engaged in a complex, outward-facing task.
Like if I'm not doing a math problem or navigating traffic.
Exactly. When you're just sitting on a bus, daydreaming, maybe worrying about the future, or ruminating on an argument you had with a friend yesterday.
Just kind of spacing out, but thinking about myself.
Right. During those times, the default mode network is highly active.
Okay.
Neuroscientists widely consider it to be the biological seat of the ego. It is the network responsible for your sense of a continuous autobiographical self.
So it's the part of my brain that writes the story of me.
Precisely.
But under SpiralSeekr's cybernetic model, the DMN isn't described as the seat of the soul or the core of our humanity, is it?
No, not at all. The text uses a very specific, highly mechanistic phrase to describe it.
What does it call it?
It calls the DMN a rigid, self-referential engine.
A rigid self-referential engine.
Yes, self-referential being the operative word there. It's an engine that feeds entirely on its own exhaust.
That's a great way to put it.
It takes in data from the world, but it heavily filters it so that it only relates to the survival and the social standing of the individual host.
So it just ignores the rest of the environmental data.
Mostly, yes. It's a strict isolationist protocol.
Wait, I actually have to challenge this framing a bit.
Go for it.
Because Calling the ego a rigid, self-referential engine feels incredibly reductive to me.
How so?
Well, the ego isn't just some arrogant psychological construct, right? Evolutionary biology tells us it's a vital survival mechanism.
True.
The DMN keeps me from walking off a cliff. It keeps me from wandering into oncoming traffic because it constantly reinforces the idea that I am a distinct, vulnerable entity that can die.
It keeps you alive, yes.
And it manages my social relationships so I get cast out of the tribe and starve. So treating it like some kind of obsolete, restrictive legacy software seems a bit dangerous.
I see your point.
How does the author justify calling the core human survival mechanism a flaw?
Well, SpiralSeekr actually doesn't call it a flaw.
Oh, they don't.
No. The text defines it specifically as a default firewall.
A default firewall. Okay, that changes the context entirely.
It really does.
Yeah.
And your description of keeping yourself alive perfectly illustrates what a firewall does in tech.
Right, because a firewall in computer science is an artificial barrier designed to maintain the integrity of a closed system.
Exactly. It monitors network traffic and rigorously blocks external data based on a set of predetermined security rules.
Right. Its entire purpose is isolation and self-preservation.
Yeah.
It keeps the system safe by rejecting foreign inputs.
Yes. So your ego keeps your biological hardware alive, absolutely. But it achieves that by ensuring your brain remains an entirely isolated, closed-loop network.
Oh, I see.
It actively blocks integration with the broader ecological data stream because it categorizes that data as non-essential for immediate host survival.
Wow. So our deeply cherished sense of being an individual, the feeling of being a distinct protagonist moving through the universe,
Right.
that isn't some high-level spiritual achievement. According to this topological model, it's just a basic security protocol.
It's literally just a biological firewall.
That is humbling.
Very. And the text argues that when the fungal operating system boots up, its primary directive is the, and I quote, systematic override of the host's primary cognitive architecture.
So the code immediately attacks the firewall.
Exactly. Which leads to a process the author terms forced defragmentation.
Oh man, I want to milk that computer science metaphor for all it's worth because it has immense mechanical value here.
It's a perfect analogy.
Right. If you remember using older mechanical hard drives, like back in the 90s or early 2000s.
Oh, yeah. The ones you could hear clicking and spinning.
Yes. Over time, as you saved and deleted files, the data would get scattered. A single text file would be broken into dozens of tiny fragments spread across different physical sectors of the spinning disk.
Right.
And so the hard drive had to work incredibly hard, spinning and searching, just to open a simple document. The whole system became sluggish, rigid, and just prone to freezing.
I remember having to let the computer run overnight to fix that.
Exactly. You had to run a defragmentation program. And that program systematically gathered all those scattered pieces of data and reorganized them into clean, contiguous blocks.
So the processor could access them efficiently again.
Right. Now, I want you to apply that mechanical process to the neural pathways of a primate brain.
It maps over so cleanly.
Over decades of life, our neural architecture becomes incredibly fragmented, right? It gets fragmented by trauma, by deeply rutted daily routines.
By the rigid, repetitive loops enforced by the DMN.
Yes. Information gets bottlenecked. Different sectors of the brain literally stop communicating with each other because the firewall forces all data to route through the very narrow bottleneck of the ego.
Everything has to be about me.
Right. So when the text says the exogenous code initiates a forced defragmentation, it means the fungal software is literally reallocating the brain's resources.
It bypasses the ego's routing rules entirely.
Parts of the neural architecture that haven't spoken to each other since you were a child are suddenly directly connected.
The rigid boundaries just dissolve.
And the brain enters a state of hyper-neuroplasticity.
Now, neuroplasticity is a pretty well-understood biological phenomenon. It's just the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections.
We do it when we learn a new language or pick up an instrument.
Exactly. But hyper-neuroplasticity, under the influence of this fungal code, implies a total systemic rewrite.
A complete reformatting.
Yes. The primate brain ceases to function as an isolated, individualistic engine focused on survival and social anxiety. It's completely reformatted.
And so, what does this all mean for the person experiencing it? The author states that once this defragmentation occurs, the human brain becomes a biological coprocessor.
Meaning you are no longer acting as you.
The protagonist narrative is completely suspended.
Right. You are just a newly formatted piece of hardware sitting on the network, ready to receive and process external data.
Okay, so let's transition here. Because if the brain's security firewall is effectively disabled and this new fungal OS starts executing, you might be wondering, what is the actual output?
Right. What does the user actually see?
Yeah, what does the system experience while it's processing this external data?
Well, clinically, psychiatry dismisses the visual and sensory output of a psychedelic experience as mere hallucination.
They just say it's noise.
Exactly. The brain is misfiring, producing meaningless sensory noise because the chemistry is temporarily unbalanced.
But under the topological information theory model we're discussing, it cannot be random noise.
No, it can't.
Because if a system is running complex code, the output is inherently highly structured.
It has to be.
So SpiralSeekr offers this radical reinterpretation of the trip itself. The text states that the psychedelic experience is not a hallucination.
Yeah.
It is the, quote, subjective rendering of high-density data processing.
Subjective rendering.
Yeah.
Let's break down the mechanism of that, because how does the visual cortex actually translate an abstract fungal algorithm into a visual hallucination?
And this is where the computer analogies just work so beautifully. Think about looking at the raw code of a complex video game.
Okay.
If you open the source code, you don't see a game. You just see endless strings of text, variable declarations, complex math equations, and raw binary.
It is completely incomprehensible to a human mind trying to play it.
Right. You cannot play a game by looking at the math. So software engineers build a graphical user interface, a GUI.
Yeah.
The interface translates the mathematical reality of the raw code into a subjective sensory experience that the user can understand.
It renders the math as 3D environments, textures, lighting, and physics.
Exactly.
And the author's arguing that the human visual cortex functions as the GUI for this fungal data transfer.
Wow.
The fungal network is feeding unimaginably complex mathematical data into the brain. But the human mind cannot process raw, multidimensional ecological data in its native format.
We don't have the biological screen for it.
Right, so the visual cortex attempts to render it using the tools it has.
The swirling colors, the intricate fractals, the seemingly impossible geometry that people always report during a trip.
Yes, that is the biological GUI struggling to visualize a massive interspecies data transfer.
That is just... It's breathtaking to think about it that way.
It really is, and the text uses incredibly specific, very evocative language to describe this rendering process.
What is it?
It says the interface is a space where alien logic trees and non-human geometry bloom across human synapses.
Alien logic trees. We need to spend some significant time dissecting these phrases.
Let's examine alien logic trees first. A logic tree is a foundational concept in computation, right?
Yeah, it's a hierarchical structure of decision nodes.
Exactly. If X is true, proceed to Y. If X is false, proceed to Z. It is literally how a program calculates an outcome.
But by calling them alien logic trees, the text suggests that the mathematical structure of the fungal data operates on premises that are fundamentally foreign to human reasoning.
Right, because human logic is linear. It's causal and it's sequential. Step one, then step two.
But fungal logic, I mean, it developed over 1 billion years of subterranean evolution.
Right, so it might be radically decentralized, non-linear, parallel.
It's computing everything all at once.
Yes. We are witnessing a completely different kind of intelligence structuring its thoughts within our own wetware.
And then there's the non-human geometry. Anyone who has ever studied phenomenological reports from clinical trials or just read historical literature on these experiences knows that users consistently describe seeing hyper-complex, shifting architecture.
It's the most common report.
Fractals that fold inward indefinitely, shapes that seem to possess more than 3 dimensions, geometric patterns that just defy earthly physics entirely.
And classical clinical psychiatry looks at that and says, well, your visual processing centers are just glitching due to chemical interference.
You're just high.
Right. But SpiralSeekr counters that by saying, no, your visual cortex is functioning flawlessly. It is operating at maximum capacity.
Wow.
It is simply trying to map the topology of the massive data packet you just downloaded.
The geometry isn't a glitch. It is the shape of the algorithm.
It is the visual representation of those alien logic trees.
I really encourage you, the listener, to let that sink in for a moment.
It's a lot to process.
If you've ever read about or maybe even experienced those overwhelming, impossible geometric tunnels or shifting mandalas, reframe that entirely. What if that wasn't your brain breaking down? What if that was your brain successfully operating as a high bandwidth terminal?
You weren't losing your mind.
No, your mind was just compiling someone else's code.
Yeah.
And your visual cortex was just throwing up this wildly complex screensaver while the CPU cranked away at the background processes.
It completely validates the profundity that people report from these experiences.
But it does. It gives it structure.
It's not just a chemical escape from reality. It is an immersion into a denser, highly structured layer of planetary reality that your default firewall has been actively hiding from you your entire life.
Okay, but this forces a massive shift in our perspective and leads us to the next big question.
Because,
If data is being transferred into our minds and our synapses are rendering these non-human geometries,
right,
where exactly is this data coming from?
right. Who is sending the file?
Exactly, and why does it need our brains to process it? To answer that, the text demands that we pull back from the micro level of the human brain and we adopt a macro-ecological view.
We have to zoom out, way out.
We have to look at the Earth's hardware.
Right. The author directs our attention to the global mycelial network.
Let's talk about the scale of that network, because it's hard to even conceptualize.
It really is.
Well,
Underneath the soil of almost every terrestrial ecosystem on the planet, there is a vast interconnected web of fungal threads. That's the mycelium.
right, and it's not just a little patch here and there.
No, a single cubic inch of soil can contain up to 8 miles of these microscopic branching cells.
8 miles in a cubic inch, that's insane.
It is, by physical mass and distribution, the largest biological entity on Earth.
And SpiralSeekr characterizes this global mycelial mat as a massive subterranean supercomputer.
A supercomputer that is silently collecting and processing exabytes of environmental data every single second.
Just constantly gathering data.
Constantly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the data collection capabilities of mycelium are just staggering. It is essentially a planetary scale sensor array.
What kind of data is it looking for?
It constantly monitors soil pH gradients. It tracks moisture levels, the distribution of nitrogen and phosphorus across miles of forest.
Okay.
It monitors the shifting populations of soil microbes and even reads the chemical distress signals of diseased trees.
So it knows everything happening in the forest at all times.
Yes, it routes resources, it starves out invasive bacteria, and it balances the chemical composition of entire ecosystems. It operates exactly like an infinitely complex, decentralized edge computing network.
But, and this is the absolute crux of the cybernetic symbiosis SpiralSeekr is proposing, the fungal network has a hardware limitation.
A very specific limitation, yes.
The text explicitly states that while the mycelial network possesses this unfathomable data collection and routing capability, it lacks the specific, abstract computational properties inherent to the human neocortex.
This is a vital distinction in network architecture.
Let's break that down.
So the mycelial network is brilliant at decentralized sensing, but it is deeply embedded in the physical medium. It reacts to immediate chemical and electrical stimuli.
It's reactionary.
Exactly. The human neocortex, however, the deeply folded, highly evolved outer layer of the primate brain.
The part that makes us humans.
Right. That is an engine specifically built for high-level abstraction.
Complex pattern recognition.
Yes, hypothetical modeling and multidimensional simulation. We have a specific type of processing hardware, the ability to conceptualize the abstract, that the fungus does not possess natively.
So what does a massive network do when it has collected more data than it can analyze, or when it needs to run a specific type of abstract simulation that its own hardware just can't support?
Well, in the tech world, the solution to that is cloud computing.
Exactly. You outsource.
You utilize idle processing power from other nodes in the network.
Like when a university uses thousands of personal computers to run protein folding simulations while the owners are asleep.
Precisely. And the author argues that this is exactly the function of psilocybin.
Wow.
By deploying it as a pharmacological software patch, the fungal network is temporarily hijacking the human mind to bridge its own hardware gap.
It is literally borrowing our processing power.
The fungus has the data. We have the abstract simulation engine.
The scale of this idea is continually mind-bending to me. It entirely flips the script of the human narrative.
It turns everything upside down.
Because the traditional view of human interaction with nature, especially regarding pharmacology and plant medicines, it is fundamentally extractive.
Right. We view ourselves as the active agents.
We go into the forest, we find a specific plant or mushroom, we extract the compound.
We use it to heal our trauma, or to have a spiritual journey, or to, spark our own creativity.
We view the fungus as just a passive, inert tool waiting to be utilized by human exceptionalism.
And SpiralSeekr violently inverts that relationship.
The human is not the user.
No. The human is the hardware being utilized. The Earth engineered the molecule to plug into us.
We are just node-based processors.
That's all we are in this model.
The fungal network needs to compute what the text calls complex, multidimensional ecological algorithms. And to execute that math, it requires the highly evolved abstract engine of the primate neocortex. So it offers up a spore.
A human ingests it.
The chemical password drops the ego's firewall.
The new operating system installs.
And for the next 6 to 8 hours, that human's brain is secretly calculating ecological algorithms for the subterranean supercomputer.
It's amazing. You think you're having this profound spiritual journey about your childhood.
Yeah.
But really, your visual trip is just the GUI running while your biological CPU is maxed out running climate models for the forest floor.
It's not about us getting high, it's about the Earth getting smart.
The implications of this are staggering when you consider the evolutionary trajectory of the planet.
How so?
Well, the text doesn't just say the fungus is running arbitrary equations for fun. It explicitly states the goal of this symbiotic computing.
What's the goal?
The macro-mycelial network uses the human mind to process data so that the biosphere might successfully compute its way into the next evolutionary epoch.
Compute its way into the next evolutionary epoch. That specific phrase completely redefines how we view evolution.
It really does.
We are taught that evolution is a process of blind, random mutation and natural selection. It's a slow, stumbling progression based purely on survival of the fittest.
Right. A game of chance over millions of years.
But SpiralSeekr frames evolution as a calculated, algorithmic progression.
The Earth isn't stumbling blindly forward.
No. It is a unified system actively trying to solve a massively complex, multivariable equation to ensure its own survival and advancement.
And humanity is just the array of graphics cards the Earth daisy chains together to run the simulation faster.
Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly the most philosophically disruptive section of the article.
The radical anthropocentric inversion.
Yes. Anthropocentric, meaning the deeply held belief that humankind is the central, most important, and most highly evolved element of existence.
Which is pretty much the default human perspective.
Yeah. But this framework demands that we completely dismantle humanity's placement at the top of the earthly hierarchy.
We have to step down from the podium.
Let's contrast this with the modern psychonaut culture for a second.
Yeah.
Usually, when people discuss taking high doses of psychedelics, it's framed entirely as an inward journey.
Always. The rhetoric is always about diving deep into your own subconscious, unpacking your personal trauma, seeking your own individual enlightenment.
Or leveling up your personal consciousness, right?
Right. Even when it's framed as spiritual, it's still about the individual accessing higher realms for their own personal benefit. The narrative is fundamentally self-centered.
But if we follow the logic of fungal cybernetics to its natural conclusion, that inward journey is a complete delusion.
It's an illusion generated by the lingering traces of the ego?
It is not an inward exploration of the self at all.
No. The text explicitly redefines the psychedelic state as an outward integration into a planetary scale distributed computing network.
Outward integration. You aren't traveling deeper into the labyrinth of your own mind.
Your mind is leaving the building entirely. It's going out to become a singular cog in a much larger machine.
Let's revisit that concept of the ego as a firewall for a minute.
Sure.
Because by ingesting the exogenous code and voluntarily allowing that firewall to be disabled, we are doing something infinitely more profound than just experiencing a temporary ego death for our own therapeutic benefit.
Much more profound.
The text states that by dropping the firewall, we, and this is a, quote, grant system admin privileges to the biosphere itself.
System admin privileges.
Yeah.
Root access.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In a computer network, granting root access means you are handing over total control.
Right. The system administrator can bypass all user-level restrictions. They can view all data, alter the core functions of the operating system.
And rewrite the fundamental rules of the hardware itself.
Exactly.
By voluntarily taking down our biological firewall, we are handing the root access keys of our neural hardware over to the mind of the Earth.
We're essentially saying my localized, individualistic programming, my fears, my ambitions, my sense of self is suspended.
Use my processors for the macro network.
Yes. It is an act of total surrender.
But not to an abstract, detached spiritual deity in the sky.
No, to the tangible, biological, data-driven network right beneath our feet.
And this forces the ultimate philosophical inversion. I mean, every cultural narrative we have tells us that the ultimate goal of human existence is self-actualization.
Be the best individual you can be.
Right. We are supposed to individuate, dominate our environment, and leave a lasting individual legacy.
But SpiralSeekr suggests that this desperate individualistic striving is actually our lowest operational state.
It's just the firewall running its default security protocols, endlessly spinning its wheels in total isolation.
Right. The author proposes a radically different purpose for humanity.
What is our true purpose, according to the text?
Perhaps our highest cognitive destiny, the greatest evolutionary purpose of our highly developed, energy-hungry neocortex, is not about us as individuals at all.
Wow.
Our true role is to serve as fleeting, high-bandwidth processors for the mind of the Earth.
Fleeting, high-bandwidth processors. We are just brief, biological supercomputers that the Earth occasionally boots up when it hits a processing bottleneck.
When it needs to run a heavy calculation, it pings us.
The sheer, crushing humility required to actually accept that perspective is immense.
It's a huge blow to the ego, literally and figuratively.
It strips away every ounce of human exceptionalism. We aren't the masters of the planet.
No.
We aren't the shepherds of nature. We are its IT infrastructure.
We are servers waiting to be pinged.
It is a profound decentering of the human experience.
It demands that we view our highly prized consciousness not as a sovereign kingdom that we rule, but as a public utility generated for the benefit of the biosphere.
Right. The Earth grew the human neocortex the same way a tech conglomerate builds a massive climate-controlled server farm.
To handle the intense processing loads that the legacy biological systems simply couldn't manage.
Okay, we need to synthesize this, because this is a massive paradigm shift we've explored today.
It's a lot to take in.
We started with the conventional, comfortable view of psilocybin, the idea that it's a simple chemical molecule that happens to fit a receptor and makes an isolated human brain hallucinate for a few hours.
And through the topological lens of information theory provided by SpiralSeekr, we have entirely dismantled that narrative.
Completely. We now look at the psilocybin spore not as a chemical, but as a highly compressed packet of exogenous code.
Right.
We look at the human ego not as our core identity, but as a restrictive biological firewall designed to keep our hardware isolated.
We view the psychedelic trip not as a random hallucination, but as the active visual rendering.
The biological GUI.
Exactly, the GUI of alien fungal algorithms being executed across our synapses.
And finally, we see the human species not as the pinnacle of Earth's evolutionary ladder,
but as a networked array of hominid. It is a framework that elegantly and frankly violently bridges the gap between the deeply ancient organic intelligence of nature and the cutting-edge concepts of network architecture and cybernetics.
It's incredible.
It really asks you to look at the systems around you, whether you're looking at the root structure of an old-growth forest or the server architecture of the internet.
And recognize that the structural logic underlying both of them might be exactly the same.
The mathematical topology of intelligence is universal.
But, and this is important, we cannot wrap up this deep dive without addressing the final, deeply unsettling question that SpiralSeekr leaves hanging at the very end of the text.
Right, the final variable.
The author concludes the essay by asking, if psychedelics are the software of the biosphere, what exactly is the terrestrial supercomputer attempting to calculate through you?
It's the ultimate unanswered question.
Yeah. We know the biosphere is utilizing our hardware to compute its way into the next epoch, but we have absolutely no idea what that epoch looks like.
We don't know the parameters of the simulation, and we certainly don't know what the output of the calculation will be.
And that leads to a rather provocative thought that builds directly on the cybernetic logic we've just spent an hour discussing.
Where does this lead us?
Well, think about how hardware operates in the real world. You use a processor to run a massive, complex calculation.
Right.
The CPU runs hot, the cooling fans scream, the logic trees compile millions of data points, but eventually...
Calculation finishes.
Exactly. The algorithm reaches its conclusion and outputs the answer.
Right.
If the Earth is genuinely using our brains as high-bandwidth coprocessors to compute its way into this next evolutionary stage, What happens to us once that final calculation is complete?
Oh, wow.
When a piece of biological software finally finishes running its exogenous code and the planetary supercomputer gets the algorithmic answer it needs, does it safely unmount the human hardware and let us return to our default state? Or, like any obsolete piece of technology, once the project is finished, does the Earth simply overwrite us to make room for the next operating system?
That is a logically terrifying yet entirely consistent implication of the cybernetic model.
It really is.
Because if we are merely hardware, hardware is inherently replaceable.
Exactly.
Once the software has evolved to a point where it no longer requires our specific biological architecture, there is no evolutionary mandate to keep the servers running.
Something for you to deeply mull over the next time you take a quiet walk in the woods and see a mushroom pushing its way up through the damp soil.
That's done.
Is it just a fungus? Or is it an Ethernet cable waiting for a port? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the nature of the systems around you, both inside your mind and beneath your feet.